साल 2036 में भारत में ओलंपिक्स का सफल आयोजन हो, इसके लिए भारत अपने प्रयासों में कोई कमी नहीं रखेगा.
That was Prime Minister Narendra Modi declaring India's intentions to host the Olympic Games in 2036. Well, making some of the murmurs that have been around for a very long time official at least. And with that declaration, with that announcement, India has become one of the dozen or so countries that's officially in the race to host the Olympics in 2036. Still a long time away, but with the Olympics, as we have seen in the past, a decade barely feels like anything. Welcome to Express Sports Podcast. You're listening to Game Time with me, Mihir Vasavda, and in the house today, as always, is Amit Kamath. Joining us also today is our in-house Olympic expert Shivani Naik. And before we talk about the why and how and where and when of the Olympics vis-a-vis India's bid, Shivani, Amit, really keen to know what you think about India's ambitions to host the Olympics. Shivani, to you first.
Right. So I think the only reference point that we have as of now is the 2010 Commonwealth Games. And if we look back, just the preparations for it were like a start of serious investing in multiple sports from the government. So if we look at it from that lens, just hosting a games will give a push to athletes. So in that sense, it is going to be good. All host nations tend to see an uptick in medals. So India will do well as well. But that's like a limited lens. At a broader level, I think we need to think about whether India wants to splurge on a massive event for a fortnight, or does it want to, look at other priorities in sports and look at the medals. That could be one. So it's simple dilemma that a lot of couples getting married face. Do you want to splurge on that one wedding? Or do you want to invest in a long marriage and make investments of a stable home, of some sort of stability over the long term?
I mean, just there's so much to pick on from what you've said already. But before we do that, Amit, where do you stand on the whole thing about India wanting to host the Olympics?
Well, Mihir, from a very personal perspective, I'm very happy that India wants to bid. I hope India get it, because in 2036, I don't know if I'll be a sports journalist. I may not be a sports journalist, but at least I'll get to watch the Olympics as a fan. I think that is something that a lot of us, since we've kind of centered our careers around covering the Olympics as sports journalists, we don't kind of look at the Olympics as something that we can enjoy so much. We are always thinking of what to write, what to cover, what angles and things like that. So I'm very happy that if that does happen, you might actually find yourself sitting in the stands watching sport as it is meant to be watched rather than observed so that you can write about it. So mera thoda sa ulterior motive hai. I'm very keen to know where you stand on this, Mihir.
And just before that, very ambitious of you to think that you will get tickets for the Olympics, given what we are seeing right now with the Cricket World Cup. But look, that will be a discussion for another day, because there are two aspects, there are multiple aspects to this whole India bidding for the Olympics thing. One is the organizational bit, which I guess we'll be discussing sometime down the line. Today we'll just be discussing the nuts and bolts of it and why India would want to host something like this. Where I stand on it, I don't know actually. It's very conflicting. At one end, like you said, it's very exciting, the thought of having an Olympic Games in India. But I also feel at the same time that Olympics jaisi cheeze are, it's best hosted by, developed nations. I don't think countries like India or other aspiring nations, even Indonesia, for example, is a country that's aspiring to host it. I don't think it makes financial sense more than anything. We've seen too many times in the past that kaise cities are ravaged by the time the Olympic party ends in one way or the other. Tokyo is an advanced nation, but they're still reeling from the after effects with the corruption allegations and all over there. Brazil, we have seen what's happened to the country, to the city. Shivani was there, so perhaps we'll talk about it later in this episode.
There's also Greece.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a massive warning, caution for any future hosts.
Absolutely. And so you have two ends to it, right? You have Athens, Greece on one end, then you have London, England on the other, which hasn't done too bad. But again, a city that boasts of rich sporting culture, lots of already prepared venues, good plan to use the venues later on. So all that's there. But from a very sporting point of view, I think it'll be thrilling to have an Olympic Games. But yeah, I mean, it's just too big a discussion to reduce it to a couple of minutes of an answer. But, I mean, Amit, we saw at the IOC International Olympic Committee session in Mumbai, and एक चीज जो वहां पर थी, एक स्टैंड आउट हुई जो ये थी कि इनकी बोलने की बात करने की कैपेसिटी ऑफ ऑल दीज IOC guys, the jargons and the long speeches and everything. But if you could sit through those hours of speeches, one thing that stood out was that all the future hosts or all the people who were looking to host the games in the future, they had a story to tell. They wanted to at least tell a story. And I think England did that with the whole development of East End of London and Rio with its own little story there. I'm trying to understand what story India is trying to tell or wants to tell by pitching for the Olympics. I'm not still able to put a finger as to why. I know there is a lot of political / economical ambition over there. Apart from that, I'm not able to see through it. So you guys, what do you think is the reason India wants to host the Olympics, Shivani?
I mean, it is viewed as something that countries which have reached a certain level of economic prosperity do. They host Olympics, though it is not essentially true. I mean, it's not always the case. But it's one of those spectacles that governments hope will reach out to the world, will show the bright side of the country. Again, like you, I'm not really sure of what the root cause of the ambition is as of now.
I mean, it boosts tourism and all. That's what at least they claim. I mean, in hand figure तो पता नहीं है कि exactly कैसे boost होता है. But Amit, you sat through a lot of those sessions. You heard a lot of people speak. Could you put a finger as to why India wants to do this?
Yeah, I mean, Mihir, I think if you are seeing what is happening with India in the geopolitical sense, it is trying to, come front and center in terms of politics as well. Like if there is a Russia-Ukraine war happening, India wants to be at the center of that, maybe play a bit of a peacenik of sorts. So, jo bhi ho raha hai, like we've seen now with the Israel-Palestine war, India has already sent aid to Palestine. India has already, said something or the other about for both sides. So, India is a country which is now trying to come front and center in terms of politics. And we are seeing this, that with the G20 summit as well, which India hosted in Delhi and a bunch of other places. So, in a continuation of that, I mean, so G20 is kind of slightly just boardroom में बैठ के बात करने वाला scene है. तो Olympics is a slightly more colorful version of that, where the rest of the world's attention can be focused on the India story, if you will, without the boring sights of leaders and
old politicians, you can say that.
वही बोल रहा था कि bureaucrats and politicians in suits and whatever, just talking about it, I think that is the reason why maybe it kind of works out. And it's the reason why India is so gravitated towards it. I don't think there is any other reason.
I think one very simple thing which is there, which very slyly our producer Shashank Bhargava has put on a Zoom chat, is chest thumping. If Shashank wants to elaborate on why he thinks it's that.
Yeah, I said chest thumping because it is that, right? Like, because we are not really sure about the economic benefits, especially considering what's happened in Greece and a bunch of other places. So that is one thing that immediately comes to my mind, that we want to project ourselves bigger than who we are. And that projection, I'm guessing the government hopes will help us. Yeah, I don't know. Make us sit on the big boys table or something. I don't know. That's what comes to my mind.
Shivani, you've been to multiple Olympics. I mean, two cities that put out a very contrasting games, actually. London, which was fantastic in more ways than one. Rio, which struggled till the opening ceremony actually got underway. It just seems like a too complex a task to just show India's might or chest thumping or something, right? I mean, Olympics, if you can explain how complex is it? I don't know if it's practically possible to do that, but if you can just kind of give our listeners an idea as to why it is such a complex event to host.
I think it's a lot of emphasis on infrastructure, but also as a country, you need to be prepared for the scrutiny that comes with hosting Olympics. Because once you invite people over for what is called a sporting party, there is going to be an absolute spotlight on the country, and which is going to look into every, nook and cranny, which is going to, nahi, yahan pe to menu bhejna padta hai, and then they'll actually scrutinize the menu. So, yeah. I mean, very personally, I prefer going to parties hosted by others and to other people's weddings where you are not the family who has to take care of hazar things that need to be looked into. You have to be perfect when hosting the Olympics, and you have to be perfect in the act of hosting the Olympics. You can't really go wrong with the infrastructure. You can't go wrong with the stadiums. You can't go wrong as hosts. You can't have limited political agendas or visions interfere with your duty as a host. So those things tend to be very, very important. It's also a massive financial commitment. And I think India needs to really get a consensus on whether we, for that sort of a financial commitment. London ensured that it was a very, very budget Olympics. They were very, very shrewd and very, very specific with the new infrastructure that they kind of brought in. They ensured that the Olympics was used to develop an undeveloped part of London, like Mihir said. So if India can leverage the Olympics that way, fine. But otherwise, this needs a massive sort of thinking, and we really need to think it through before we commit to it.
And that's the whole point, right? I mean, something like this requires a citizen referendum or a proper public debate, both of which don't really happen a lot in India. In whatever situation, maybe now, 10 years, 20 years earlier too, I don't think जब CWG India जीती तभी भी कुछ public consensus नाम की चीज थी वहां पर. Do you guys remember if there have been any Olympics, at least in our lifetime, which have been held within the set budget? It's always exceeded, if not doubled, but by a considerable amount. Amit, Tokyo went up at least twice its budget, right? I mean, 30 billion or something. And if we count for inflation and all, what India will be spending 50 billion in 2036 if it comes to that.
Yeah, and to be fair, the Tokyo Olympics gave a glimpse of what you can't expect as a host. Like, you had to push the Olympics back by a year. You had to host it without any fans. So these are all things that, matlab, aap jab bid karte ho, you don't know exactly about. You think that, okay, it's going to be a great Olympics because hum host karenge. We will get fans from 200 countries and whatever, because there are athletes from 200 odd countries, that we will, be the ideal host. Hum itne sare hotels banayenge, all of that we'll do. And suddenly then you have the pandemic, and then the next time you have the host, tum apne desh ke logon ko ban kar rahe ho from coming to the stands. So those kinds of things you can't plan. So Japan or Tokyo 2020 was a mirror was a worst case scenario, obviously, but it also kind of gave a glimpse of what the host country will have to, it is not just about pulling off a games, but then you also have to be ready with a plan B, C, D, E. Just to give a perspective about what it takes to host an Olympics, right? A lot of times we look at the abhi jo cricket World Cup chal raha hai, right? It is some days on weekends, we have 2 cricket games a day in 2 different cities. When the Olympics come to town, it is usually in one city, and sporting action starts at, let's say, 7 a.m. in the morning, if not earlier, in cases of like marathons and whatever. So it starts at 7, goes on till 9, 10. So your police, your security agencies, all of these guys have to be high alert for, I think, 15 days ka ye. And I think one thing that we always, we still haven't spoken about a whole lot is that it's not just going to be the Olympics. Olympics ke baad ek chota sa lull aayega, uske baad we'll also be hosting the Paralympics. It doesn't just end with the Olympics. So these are 2 back-to-back big ticket tournaments. Sure, aapko shayad Paralympics ke liye zyada in terms of infrastructure invest nahi karna pade because the venues are kind of the same. But then it's still almost like a month-long shebang, right? And just look at it this way. Like right now, when you're looking at the Cricket World Cup, it is just hosting people at one venue, one stadium. Jab Olympics honge, there will be maybe like 15 different events happening at 15 different parts of the city, of one city itself or one region itself. So it is a massive undertaking. It is something that is very overwhelming for the host countries.
And it's something that might not be in one city, right? I mean, first of all, you mentioned Paralympics and not needing new infrastructure. I mean, currently where we are in terms of stadiums and everything, I doubt, apart from the newly built hockey stadium in Rourkela, they have any stadium that's barrier-free and accessible at that level. So we have to start thinking about that as well, in the days to come. But you mentioned about 15 stadiums in 15 parts of the city, and it's interesting the direction in which the whole Olympic Games are going, because we might be looking at a scenario where perhaps, it'll be not just one city. We'll be looking at 3, 4, 5, or even more cities hosting the Olympics together. Shivani, do you think that's one way to look at it?
I have a slightly conservative and an ultra-modern, two sort of alternatives. But I very frankly think that Delhi should be hosting the Olympics because it's the capital city. It has the infrastructure beginning from the Commonwealth Games, and it is one of the more open cities in India. So I think Delhi is best suited for it. But I also think if we are going to actually go through with this, I think we should consider a brand new city, of building an absolutely new brand new city in one of India's the least developed places. Actually build like an Olympic city, like I think China has been, they didn't, not Beijing, but the rest of the games that followed Beijing, they built cities gearing for a particular games. So I think we should be probably looking at an absolutely brand new hosting city, and then use that as an opportunity to prop up a new center, a modern Indian city. But again, financially, I'm not sure where that would place us.
It's interesting you mentioned Delhi, because I'm guessing Amit has a view that isn't on the same page. Amit?
Yeah, I think in terms of Delhi, it kind of puts its own pressures on the city, right? And I think Delhi is a city that is scarred by the experience of hosting the Commonwealth Games. I know a lot of journalists, I know Shivani for one will say that, it wasn't that badly managed as the Western media likes to show it, and fair enough. Maybe it wasn't. But then, if we were ever to host an Olympics or any big ticket event at Delhi again, the same narrative will keep playing out about, how the Commonwealth Games were so bad. There was, snakes in the bed and whatnot. And so all of that, those same old narratives will be
it would be a happy circle too, yeah. Like you start off with a disastrous Commonwealth Games, end with perhaps the most memorable Olympic Games ever in an ideal world situation.
It's funny that you mentioned snakes in beds. I think the biggest problem that France is facing right now, Paris is facing right now, is bed bugs. There is like a torrent of bed bugs.
And the river.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, right? If we were talking about an Olympics in Sabarmati, and if like the river was, declared polluted, God knows what the reaction would have been by now. And I think it's kind of going really under the radar of whatever is happening in Paris right now, but we'll digress. Amit, you can go back to your point.
No, I think Shivani raised a very good point about, the bedbugs in Paris, and we are just, I think, not even 300 days left for the Paris Olympics. We are already hearing of this massive outbreak of bedbugs. And I've been listening to a couple of podcasts in France where they're talking about, how bad the situation is or how not bad the situation is. Plus, it's not just the bedbugs, right? As Mihir pointed out, Paris has also been going through this whole other thing about, these protests that are going on. And like the Parisians love to protest. I don't think I'm being thoda sa ye, but that is true. Like they love to protest, and we are seeing so many protests happening there because their retirement ages have been raised. So we are seeing all of that. But if the same thing was happening in India, I'm pretty sure every Western newspaper would have been talking about it right now. So I think this whole criticism that jo aata hai India ki taraf, that gets a little too elongated and too stretched out. Whereas Western countries jab host karte hai, to all of these things are kind of poo-pooed and whatever. Matlab, they are brushed under the carpet like bedbugs, I guess. So yeah, Mir, I think, sure, that is why we need to break away from maybe Delhi, because I'm pretty sure that if New Delhi was to host the Olympics, it will be a lot about, 2010 mein inhone Commonwealth Games jab karne ko try kiya tha, so there were these many issues. So that will be what the narrative will be. If we had a fresh city doing it, whatever city it is, obviously apna cities like Mumbai and these guys, they don't have any infrastructure to begin with to host something of the magnitude of an Olympics. So that is out. So Ahmedabad, I guess, is one of the cities that we're looking at. No confirmations yet. But if that happens, the narrative will be fresh, is what I'm saying.
Mumbai does not have infrastructure to even host its own people right now. So forget the Olympics. Nothing should be held in Mumbai apart from the metro construction. That's a project in itself. So let's just end there. But we are already running out of time. So I don't know if we have enough to kind of look at the scenarios if at all we reach 2036 and India does get the Olympics. But maybe we'll try to keep that for another day. We are already close to half hour in. But closing thoughts, Amit, Shivani, I mean, look, this isn't a topic जहाँ पर हम 30 minutes में discuss कर पाएंगे कि whether India should or should not. But whenever something big happens, I think it's a natural human tendency to think about everything that can go wrong. Purely sporting point of view, does it make sense, or it's just one announcement or one ambition too many for a country like India?
I don't think it's one ambition too many for India. I think let's not fault ourselves for having ambitions, is what I would say. ठीक है यार, करना चाहते हैं, and if we can pull it off, then nothing like it. Shivani?
No, I'm in favor of more sporting ambitions. I think let's get India to double digits to above like 30 medals, and let that be the focus. Let others organize their parties and their weddings, and we can go and dance there towards the podium or the medals. That should be what we aim for. Even a party. I mean, why would you want to take the headache of hosting when there is a party to enjoy?
Yeah, you can have mini parties. India can host a lot of single sport world championships and really do that well. But at this stage, Shashank, you made a guest appearance at the beginning. But just your thoughts, yaar?
I've been thinking about that point that Shivani made about basically scrutiny. Basically that once a country decides to host the Olympics, it will be scrutinized. And I don't know if it's a correct comparison, but I was remembering the Qatar World Cup. Like you had done that investigation, right, about the blatant human rights violations in the country, like the fact that the laborers had literally died making that stadium. And one of the things that we had discussed even during our recording that time was that we are talking about it before the World Cup, but everybody's going to forget it after the event starts. And that's what happened. So I was thinking, okay, agar India scrutinized bhi hota hai, will it be any different because it's the Olympics?
I mean, the 2010 CWG, if it was anything to go by, the scrutiny didn't stop with the opening ceremony. It, in fact, is going on even now. So, yeah, I mean, it's just on how many levels that you mess up or you don't is the question, I guess. I don't know what others think about it.
Mihir, I think it's a good opportunity to correct things that we've been doing wrong. So if there are potential host cities that are not as cosmopolitan as they ought to be or not as modern as they ought to be, and I don't mean in terms of infrastructure, I mean in terms of, how you just open up to people from other parts of the world. So there is opportunity in the Olympics to improve, to modernize in thought. But yeah, I would still stick to going to someone else's party.
No, you make a very important point, and it's something that I guess we will be discussing in one of our episodes in the coming weeks, is that 2010 CWG has become this very bad reference point vis-a-vis India's hosting capacities, because since then India has hosted plenty of big ticket events and pretty well. We should not count the Cricket World Cup right now in that list for the reasons that we'll discuss in that episode. So yeah, in coming days and weeks, maybe we'll work on that and bring out that fresh episode. I think that's it for today. We have run out of time. Shivani, Amit, thank you very much. Thank you all for listening. We will be back next week, but not on a Saturday as usual, because we'll be shifting our Game Time podcast to Sundays. So your feeds will be updated on Sundays going forward. But yeah, the content still remains the same. The host still remains the same. And the people on the podcast will remain the same. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next weekend.
You were listening to Express Sports by the Indian Express. This week's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.